Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be jumping back into the SCP universe here with the Exploring series. This is a requested video by one of my YouTube members. We're going to be checking out SCP-4971 Rituals. Links will be down below in the description as always to the original video without my commentary and reaction and to the Exploring series channel. Please do me a favor as we go through this video. If you enjoy it, click that link and give this video a like. And if you enjoy the Exploring series content and you're not already subbed to him, please do me the favor of going over there and showing the man some love, hitting that sub button on his channel. He definitely, deserves it. He makes a lot of great content for the SCP universe, as well as others, 40K, etc., etc. So yeah, go over there, give him some love, check out his stuff. If you'd like to join us when we do these reactions live, we'd love to have you guys come in and join the conversations, add your 2 cents. There is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube memberships, benefits, and tiers that I offer. If you've been around with the channel for a while and decide you want to take your support to the next level, check those out, see if you'd have any interest in doing so, and get early access to videos, priority, any kind of reaction requests, stuff like that. So just check them out, see if it has the interest for you. Well, all that said, let's jump into the video here. Again, this is SCP-4971 Rituals by the Exploring series. Volume up. That's on. Let's go.
SCP-4971 Rituals. How do you contain a god?
That is a good question. Just from the start of this already, I can feel like we're going to be getting into the story with the deer. And honestly, that's one of the SCPs that... What's the word I'm looking for? I guess maybe ponder, think about, whatever you want to say. The most on like why the ritual they did, like how they came up with the ritual they did and why. And I guess really it's just a situation where it works simply because the god thinks that it works. So it doesn't really matter what the ritual is, what it contains, just the act of doing the ritual made it work. You know what I'm saying? So I'm interested to, I guess, see if they elaborate more on this with what he's saying. But I have a feeling we're going to be getting into this. And I'm curious to see what other kind of rituals and things they come up with here in this. Excuse me. Apologize for coughing so much all of a sudden. Anyway.
I've asked this question before, as the answer tends to be pretty interesting. Some can be asked, or convinced, or bargained with. Some can be forced into containment through convoluted or strange containment procedures, and some simply cannot.
Yeah, and I would assume the Scarlet King will probably be brought up. I'm trying to think of what other things that I know of as far as SCPs that we've already gotten into that's gotten into rituals. The 3 that come to mind are obviously the deer, the Scarlet King, and then the I forget what the SCP number is, but it's like one where a ritual went wrong and it has connections with Alagata, I believe. Where like this fishing town had some like really weird stuff going on with it. It was a really interesting and fascinating story, but I can't remember what the SCP number of it is. But anyway, so those are the 3 that I can think of. I'm trying to think of what other ones might come up to have any kind of ritualistic stuff other than stuff that might have to do with Davites. But anyway.
To their own devices against a powerless foundation. But what if it was theoretically possible to contain a god, and the Foundation knew exactly how to do it, but the cost was simply far too great?
That would be pretty crazy if that's the case.
With SCP-4971. In addition,
like, the SCP pretty much, for it to be something where the cost is too great, that would have to be like an absolute extreme for the SCP, I feel like, right? Because they pretty much seem to be like, no matter, it feels like the mindset of the SCP almost is like containment at almost all costs, right? It's like almost. They're willing to go to basically the extreme as long as it doesn't, I guess, harm like the overall bit of humanity, I guess. I don't know how to phrase it, but as long as it doesn't destroy humanity, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like if humanity, if it gets to the point where like even a significant portion of the human race were to be wiped out, but as long as humanity still survived and they could rebuild, the SCP, I feel like they would still call that a win. You know what I'm saying? That kind of a situation. As long as they could, regain control, contain the anomaly eventually, wipe out people's memories, and restart things, they would still call that a W. But for it to be at a point where going that extra step is like too much, like, that's pretty crazy.
In addition to that question, we also get a strange extra-dimensional location, cultists, and some classic cosmic horror. 4971
I'm down with all of that.
is a space-time anomaly inside of the former Southwood Park Mall in Havensbrook, Indiana.
Okay.
The entrance to this anomaly inside of the mall varies from time to time, but inevitably, if someone wanders through the mall, they'll find it. We'll get to specifics about the nature of this anomaly later, but basically it's a gigantic, weird forest. The mall itself opened in 1985 and closed in 2006, leading local vagrants and trespassers to frequently break in order to scavenge the empty shops. At one point, the police received some calls that a group of teenagers had entered the mall and were performing satanic rituals in there. The police found evidence of a break-in, but nothing else. At this point, obviously, the space-time anomaly did not exist within the mall. In 2007, though, the local police responded to another call about a break-in, this time with witnesses reporting screams and some unnatural sounds coming from inside. The group of trespassers had apparently been caught previously trying to break in, and this time they succeeded. When the police searched...
On a side note here, I often wonder as I'm listening to, a lot of the videos here by the Exploring series and the Vulcan and Mr. Illustrated, etc., and all the guys that make, a lot of these SCP videos. Like, if you listen to the background, like, ambience music they have going on here, they do a really good job of, like, making it, like, fit with whatever video they're doing. I often wonder, like, where they get some of their music from. Like, the music that's going on right here already kind of set the tone for a very, like, kind of a creepy, otherworldly, eldritchy horror feel to the tale. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's go back here.
The group of trespassers had apparently been caught
just listen to the music,
trying to break in, and this time they succeeded.
Like, it feels like it almost would, again, I've said this a million times, but it feels like it would be something kind of almost out of a Souls game or a Bloodborne game. I could hear this music in the background of an area in one of those games.
Previously trying to break in, and this time they succeeded. When the police searched the mall this time, they stumbled upon the anomaly, newly created, it seems. A number of local law enforcement officers were lost within the anomaly before the Foundation swooped in, and all that was recovered were scrambled transmissions of officers panicking. After the discovery of the SCP, the Foundation began piecing together what it was and what might have created it. Or rather, who might have created it. One of the missing teenagers that broke into the mall and didn't come back out was 19-year-old Katerina Randolph. Katerina had disappeared from her grandparents' house in Maine sometime previously, but the police suspected that she really just ran off because she had been spotted mingling with a group of far-left naturalist pseudo-occultists known as the Daughters of Eden.
Okay.
Essentially,
I'm assuming the Daughters of Eden are some other kind of SCP organization that I just haven't gotten into yet, but I guess let me know in the comments.
The Daughters of Eden are a group of neo-druids who believe that mankind has disrupted the natural order of things and attempt to use various magic rituals to restore the balance of nature.
Interesting.
Katerina had already been arrested at least 4 times as part of the Daughters of Eden's protest,
so I assume they did a ritual that went wrong here.
She was never taken back to Maine. The Foundation had been watching the Daughters of Eden because of one of their members, Anna Christian, who was also involved with a group of actual occultists operating out of 3 Portlands.
Gotcha.
About a decade ago, Anna had gotten her hands on some occult artifacts from Miskatonic University in Massachusetts, and has been using them for minor summoning rituals. Miskatonic University is not a real school, by the way, but a fictional creation of H.P. Lovecraft, used in a number of stories set in the Cthulhu mythos.
Gotcha.
The most notable thing that Anna had grabbed was a text called The Last Appeal of Biffy. Part of the text had been used in the 80s by a group to summon a minor planar entity, which was apparently significant enough that any veteran MTF agent would be familiar with the event. According to stories, The Last Appeal of Biffy was written by a minister recording the last words of a witch named Biffy during an exorcism that involved burning her alive.
Interesting name.
Occultists believe that Biffy was reciting an old chant that would summon nature spirits to drive away European colonials. There had been 6 copies of this text originally, 3 of which were burned by other Puritans, and 1 lost at sea in the 1870s. 1 was bought by someone named Oswald Carter, who I assume to be connected to Marshall Carter in Dark, who then burned it.
Huh.
The final.
That's interesting. That's a member of Marshall Carter in Dark would burn something like that, right? You'd think they would want to keep it either as part of their collection, because that's kind of what they do, right? They collect anomalous stuff and then potentially resell it or whatever on their black markets. So you would think they would want to keep it and or resell it. It's interesting that they destroyed it.
Final copy ended up at Hitler's bedside table until the end of World War II.
Okay.
And it eventually ended up at Miskatonic. A few months prior to the discovery of 4971, the Foundation had raided the Daughters of Eden, arresting Anna in the process. They didn't find 2 things, though: Katerina and the last appeal of Biffy. It's no coincidence that shortly afterwards, Katerina is seen on camera breaking into the mall with the last appeal of Biffy in hand, and then a crazy space-time anomaly is found. A lot of the last appeal contains small incantations to summon lesser entities and to alter the weather and temperature, etc. There is a big ritual in the text, though, that summons an entity whose name translates to the one who knows silence in the earth. This is the final entity that Biffy called.
I mean, that makes me think of the Dread Titania. You know, the one who calls silence in the earth, I think is what it said, right? Let me just listen to that again.
That summons an entity whose name translates to the one who knows silence in the earth.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Dread Titania and, you know, the tree that goes underground with the Children of the Night and, you know, their goddess, etc.
This is the final entity that Biffy called upon as they drove flaming pokers into her eyes.
Yikes.
So it's the actual last appeal. Presumably, it would be pretty problematic if someone summoned this thing. The Foundation knows about this entity because they had gone to Miskatonic in the past, and the Dean of Anthropology there had split the text in half, giving the second half to the Foundation. The only reason that Biffy didn't succeed on summoning the entity during her death was because it involves a hefty amount of human sacrifice. The Foundation assumes that this is why Katerina entered the mall with a crew of cultists. The second half of the text describes an inverse incantation that can close the door to the dimension containing this entity if it's ever opened. Basically, it's fairly easy to open this gate, involving the sacrifice of a handful of humans.
Right, it's probably harder to close
the gate after it's been opened, however, is far trickier.
Yeah, that's usually the case.
It depends on how soon you try to close the gate after it's been opened, with the number of human lives required doubling every hour.
Yeah.
There is an upper limit to this number, though, and it was just reached. So now the Foundation knows that they could close the gate on this entity, but it would require the sacrifice of every living human on the planet.
Yep, that would be a problem.
They're going to keep looking into it. So, we have a containment procedure then, one that they're pretty sure would work. It just requires a hefty sacrifice.
So, I mean, again, they have SCP-2000, so you would think, right? Like, I feel like, I don't know, this is just where my mind goes, and maybe it's not really the case, but SCP-2000 really feels like a huge failsafe for a lot of things. I'm sure there would be very reluctant to use it unless they absolutely have to. But, like, if this entity is going to cause all kinds of havoc and who knows, you know, what it's going to do, etc., and what it could lead to, you know, program SCP-2000 to, you know, repopulate the world and start over again, you know? I mean, if it was a situation where SCP-2000 had never been used before, that might be a different story, but it seems like it's been indicated it's been used more, you know, multiple times throughout history, so it almost seems like, you know, a situation where do it and just use SCP-2000 and restart everything.
They submit the viable containment procedures to the ethics committee to see how they feel about it, but they're not quite on board. The problem isn't entirely based around killing off every human on the planet, which
Probably
the
how you
Foundation
have to do
would
it.
be willing to do if the situation called for it.
Right.
But also the problem is that they have yet to see this entity and don't really know that much about it.
Right. I mean, it could also be a situation where it's like they open the door, the entity comes through, now it's in our realm. If you close the door, you know, now it's stuck here, right? So it's probably also a situation of, okay, we know how to close the door, but where is and what is this entity? And if it's here, we'll closing the door to trap it here or cut it off from the source of its power so it will be, you know, harmless, useless, or die off. Or do we have to put this entity back where it came from first?
The Ethics Committee rules that the containment procedures are not acceptable given the current condition of the anomaly itself. Since the containment procedures are not accepted, they send it over to the Classification Committee to rule on what object class this anomaly is. This is the committee that looks at the nature of the SCP itself and the containment procedures to decide whether it's safe or Euclid, etc. Normally, this isn't that big of a decision, but this is a somewhat unique scenario, as there are containment procedures that would work to contain the entity, but the Foundation cannot carry them out for some reason.
Okay.
This results in the creation of the Kernunos class.
Gotcha.
This is a rather specific name for an object class, as Kernunos is a Celtic nature deity, often depicted with horns or antlers, worshipped as the Lord of the Forest.
Right.
The name doesn't really have anything to do with the Foundation having containment procedures they can't utilize, but is really more specifically connected to the entity in 4971, as we'll see. When raiding the living quarters of Katerina, the Foundation found the Manifesto of the Daughters of Eden, and were given a small excerpt from it. They refer to themselves as both the Daughters of Eden and the Daughters of Gaia, referring to the Greek Mother Earth goddess. In short, they vehemently oppose the modern world and the corruption of the natural earth. They claim that the sword of Gaia's deliverance has been passed into their hands, and they will wield it without hesitation to wash this world clean of the sins of their fathers and sons.
Gonna have another Noah ritual happen here.
Gaia's champion
Of a great
back
flood.
into the world and allow it to torment the souls of all who have scarred the world. So, presumably, Katerina and the Daughters of Eden went into the mall to summon this champion of Gaia.
And probably
nature
succeeded,
deity,
I would assume.
cleanse the modern world. I know what you've all been waiting for, and that's an exploration log. Let's get into it then, with MTF Epsilon 13 as a six-man team heading into the mall shortly after its discovery. Various hostile entities have been encountered leaving the mall, which were put down by the Foundation, and a steel slab was placed over the entrance. The team enters through.
So a bunch of hostile entities have already been seen trying to leave the mall, so then they sealed up it so that they can't get out. So obviously then there's more than one creature that can come through whatever this gateway is they've opened, it seems, right?
through the front into the main lobby.
This is already starting to sound kind of like Resident Evil-ish, you know, these group of occultist druids have opened a gateway to another realm, letting all kinds of monsters and creatures in, and now we're part of a special task force that has to go in and clear out the mall and find out what's going on and seal the gate. It's very Resident Evil-ish, or at least, you know, an interesting story for something Resident Evil-ish.
The air inside the mall smells off, the first sign that something is amiss. There is plenty of evidence of looting and vandalism throughout the mall, but the team soon comes across a collapsed skywalk, something that vandals surely didn't do. Walking past a clothing store, they spot 3 huddled figures behind clothing racks,
That's
and one
pretty creepy.
humanoid figure bound in thick webbing in front of them.
That's pretty creepy.
The humanoid figure is not moving, and the 3 figures just sit and watch the team from the shadows.
A humanoid figure wrapped in thick webbing. So we've already got some crazy ass, you know, spider things going on here. I'm already at the point of nuking the site from orbit.
So they move on. As they continue moving, they realize that the hall they've been going down has extended past the external dimensions of the mall, a pretty common occurrence in these types of situations. The sound of rushing
reality
water
seems to be
grows
getting
louder
warped.
as they keep moving, however, and finally they enter into the atrium, where they fully encounter SCP-4971.
Okay.
SCP-4971 takes the form of a massive forest, similar in appearance to locations in the Yukon or the Pacific Northwest.
Gotcha.
About 400,000 cubic meters in volume.
Aspens, pines, etc.
The forest extends as far as the eye can see in every direction, broken up only by occasional large plateaus or mountains in the far distance. The team is standing on top of a cliff overlooking the forest.
Interesting. So it's created kind of a whole new naturescape inside of this mall. There's mountains and forests going on as far as the eye can see. So, like, I wonder, is it like, has it warped reality inside the mall to where, like, they've passed through into whatever this gateway is? Like, have they gone into whatever this gateway is and this is what they're seeing now? Or is it changing reality in the mall itself? So, like, there's an interdimensional space inside the mall that now is like this giant Pacific Northwest forest with mountains and living creatures and animals and, you know, etc.
And from this side, the mall behind them looks overgrown. The sun is low in the sky, close to setting, and in front of them, towards the edge of the cliff, is a large symbol carved into the earth. The symbol consists of concentric rings surrounding a series of triangles and more rings.
Almost sounds, well, I was going to say the first thing that came to my mind was like the spiral configuration symbol that the Children of the Forest made for the Night King or whatever in Game of Thrones. But then they started talking about the triangles, so.
A red fluid, later determined to be human blood, fills in the carvings of the symbol.
Yep.
At the center is the remains of a fire, beneath which lie the charred remains of some sort of hoofed animal, with several small glass vials shattered on the ground nearby. In front of the symbol is a makeshift wooden altar, with a lantern and a bloody machete resting on top of it. Next to the altar are several blood-soaked sponges and a leather-bound book, half of the last appeal of Biffy. Obviously, the site of a ritual.
Right.
The team had been briefed on the last appeal of Biffy, so they recognized the symbol as the one used to summon the powerful entity. But since that ritual requires quite a few human sacrifices, they figured there would be a bunch of bodies here. A total of 61 people entered the mall with Katerina, and there were also 4 cops that went missing, which would be enough to summon the entity, but the fate of their bodies is currently a mystery.
I wonder if it's a situation where their bodies were used to create like a physical body for this entity.
Since it doesn't look like they have much light left, the team decides to attempt to get to the bottom of the cliff to make camp. Over the next 2 hours, they nearly reach the bottom, but point out that the sun hasn't moved since they arrived. At the bottom, they encounter a small clearing at the entrance to the forest, and they discuss their mission here. Their goal is to locate the powerful entity, the one who knows silence in the earth, so that the Foundation can bring in a heavy fire team and eliminate it. The problem is, as I said, they have no idea what this thing looks like or what it does.
I mean, it could just be the forest and the landscape itself, right?
The last appeal of Biffy is mostly just curses and threats, with no...
It's supposed to be like this warrior of Gaia, so like, what would you think a warrior of a nature spirit would be, other than, I guess, you know, the forest itself? You know, maybe that's just what it is. It's just manifesting nature.
No descriptions. And if it wasn't for the presence of this anomaly or the summoning of a different entity back in the 80s, most would just write off the text as mad ravings. They radio back to command, explaining that they've entered some type of forest, noting that the trees are bigger than normal here, everything is more colorful than it should be, and the sun hasn't moved.
So the saturation's turned up a little bit.
Command wants to make sure they grab the book, but otherwise they want the team to travel to a nearby water source.
It's kind of also reminding me of the SCP about the Fey Forest, where, you know, the people go in there and you can't give them names because the names give them power, and they can like steal your identity, your soul, your being, or whatever if you give them the names. I don't know. It reminds me. It's reminding me of that.
Either a river or stream, and camp out there until the fire team arrives. As they head out, one of the team members notes that something in this forest is creating a lot of electromagnetic noise, which will likely screw with their equipment. After an hour of walking through the forest, the team realizes that 5 or 6 entities have been trailing them for some time.
Probably the dudes that were watching it from the beginning that you just let alone. Like,
they keep going, but 20 minutes later, they hear some sort of animal chattering nearby, and the entities have stopped following them.
That's not good.
Using night vision, they see a glimpse of an animal ahead of them, with a weird light around its head. As they approach the river, it seems as if it's actually getting dark now, and they no longer have contact with command. As they start to set up camp, all of their voice recorders cut out in unison.
Yikes.
That's all we get out of Epsilon 13 for now. We are then given a Foundation document discussing the specifics of SCP-4971. It's similar to many other types of space-time anomalies they've found, as it has specific boundaries, it doesn't move or shift, and it isn't hidden in any way.
Gotcha.
It's different in a few ways, however. One being that it is the largest anomaly of this type by far, and since its existence is being maintained by an external energy source, they hypothesize that the source is an entity of considerable power. The last appeal of Biffy is a cry for the annihilation of things considered unnatural, that is, man-made.
So, I mean, yeah, it could very well be, like I said, you know, the weapon could be the nature itself and the forests and these things retaking over and consuming, you know, the world of concrete.
The force responsible for this annihilation will bear some likeness to Earth, and is associated with a symbol, one that Biffy carved into her own chest as she died. The symbol is that series of rings, triangles,
with the rings with the triangle,
known as the Voxen Eye.
Voxen Eye.
The Voxen Eye has pretty ancient origins, and has been seen in documents found in Druidic ruins in southern Britain. The documents describe the Voxen Eye as a sort of focus through which power can be channeled, specifically to move nature into action. Another text that discussed the Voxen Eye was called Porter's Writings on Arcane Beasts, written by a Victorian-era cryptozoologist named Edward Porter, who had encountered several other SCPs. Perhaps he was associated with Lord Blackwood. In the text,
which I still need to finish that last Lord Blackwood video.
When discussing an unknown prehistorical North American civilization, Porter writes that they feared the trees more than anything else, as the trees provided them with both great bounty and great fear. On nights of the full moon, they would make sacrifices to the god of the tall trees, named the one who knows silence in the earth. It's said that
I mean, that sounds like Titania, right? Because, like, she was a goddess of the stars for the Fae, right? So, nighttime, full moon, stars, that seems like it would line up. And her heart turned into this prison that was a giant tree, right? So, I don't know. It's still kind of getting along those kind of vibes.
this entity would have.
But at the same time, right, like, she's already there. It wouldn't be something that, like, should be able to be resummoned, right? So, I don't know.
Emerge from the forest to take in the earth of the tall trees, named the one who knows silence in the earth. It's said that this entity would emerge from the forest to take payment in human hearts for the protection of the tribe. Only through a Voxen eye could this entity be viewed and its magnificence be understood. Modern occultists familiar with this entity describe its name as a taboo, and uttering it would be crossing a line. The tale of Biffy and her cry for help is regarded as a tragedy, but her incantation to specifically call upon this entity is considered dangerous and foolish. Some even argue that Biffy was mistaken and was attempting to contact the wrong entity entirely.
Right, okay.
Regardless, occultists believe that not even death would allow you to escape meeting with this entity after.
I mean, that could make sense in certain ways, right? Because I would assume in this kind of universe with the cult and gods and things like that, that there would probably be other beings and entities that would masquerade as something they're not and pretend to be something they're not in order to get people to do what they want, or to potentially release them into, you know, our world, our realm. So it very well could be that, yeah, she was trying to summon something, and the ritual she did actually summoned something else, or attempted to summon something else that had ulterior motives.
Believe that not even death would allow you to escape meeting with this entity after calling it. So, one MTF down, time to send in another one.
All right, as
the
one
Heavy
does.
Fire Team, Iota 44, are sent into the forest with the goal of both finding the first team and eliminating the entity responsible for this. By the time the fire team reaches the forest, the sun has returned to its previous position. It would later be calculated that the sun spends 12 hours in a stationary setting position before actually setting, and then
So the sun just sits in one spot for 12 hours and then just disappears, and then reappears, I would assume, after another 12 hours.
spending 1 hour in darkness before restarting.
Just 1 hour.
The forest is quiet now, but the team begins picking up a broadcast on their comms frequency of someone singing "The Girl from Ipanema." Many figures begin moving through the foliage around them, and something in the sky above them illuminates the forest briefly. In front of them, standing beneath a tree, is a humanoid figure, mostly hidden in darkness. It is naked, with a mess of tree branches, leaves, and vines bound around its neck like a collar. Instead of a head, it has a glowing white symbol, vibrating rapidly. The team's video footage distorts heavily while looking at it, and they ask Command how they should deal with it. Of course, they can't get a response from Command, and all they hear is the singing continuing. They attempt to communicate with the humanoid entity, but it only begins moving towards them, rapidly disappearing and reappearing.
Even creepier.
When in doubt, of course, open fire.
Yeah, I mean,
so
yeah.
One of them shoots a barrage of bullets at the strange entity. As the bullets strike the target, a glowing white light erupts from the entry points, and it staggers backwards before collapsing. There is the sound of a high-pitched scream, followed by breaking glass, and the symbol where its head should be shatters and disappears. At this point, the team's sensors pick up many figures closing in on them, and they begin to see more glowing white symbols popping up around them. The figure...
Okay. So I wonder if the people in the ritual were transformed into whatever these creatures are with the triangles.
On the ground begins shaking violently before rising as if being lifted by its shoulders.
Wait, what did you say?
Many figures closing in on them, and they begin to see more glowing white symbols popping up around them. The figure on the ground begins shaking violently before rising as if being lifted by its shoulders. Another sound is heard, later determined to be the scream and breaking glass, but in reverse, and the white symbol appears above the entity's head again. When really in doubt, run, and the team flees from the enclosing group of entities.
When really in doubt, nuke the site from orbit, like I said.
One of the team members trips and falls, and he is quickly swarmed by the figures.
Yeah.
Another member begins grappling with one of the entities, attempting to shoot it. His arm is soon ripped off by the entity, however, and he disappears.
Well, okay.
As the other members continue to flee, they pick up a transmission from MTF Epsilon 13. They tell the fire team to head for open air and get higher, as the entities seem to be restricted to the forest.
Interesting.
The fire team sprints towards a rise out of the forest as more and more entities converge upon them, and suddenly the ground begins to shake. One of the members falls behind and is grabbed, and she says something that is expunged from the record before she is shot by one of her teammates.
I wonder why. Yeah, is it what would she say? Right? She say something about their name? Like, I don't know. I wonder if, like, did she shout someone's name and their name is expunged because, you know, these people, I don't know, maybe this task force is like secretive that way or something like that? Or was she herself like, pleading? Oh, yeah, I can't stop yawning. Pleading to, like, these entities.
3 members down, the rest of Iota 44 regroup on the rise, safe for the moment from the entities.
We got like some trimmer stuff going on now.
Epsilon 13, who speculate that the entities are fragments of the people that were sacrificed in the ritual.
Yeah.
They won't die because they're being powered by something else, something pretty strong, that is also the source of the EM static. Epsilon 13 says that they were at a river nearby Iota 44 about a week ago, proving that time doesn't work the same here. Another common occurrence. They lose connection with one another as Epsilon 13 reports a lot of static and something moving to the south of them. All radios cease working entirely as a loud, low, droning sound is heard across the forest. One of the Iota 44 members' video camera records an image of a 4-legged animal with a glowing white symbol for a head. Great. Now they've...
There's some kind of game where something like that happened. I'm trying to think of what it is. Maybe it's Remnant 2 or one of the Remnant games, but like I remember some kind of like creatures that you fought that their heads had like changed into some kind of like glowing things or whatever. Maybe it was Remnant in one of the stages, but anyway.
Lost contact with 2 teams. In some cases, this might be when they send in the really impressive team to rescue everything.
Yeah.
And although that's not really what happens here, we're not quite done with the MTFs yet. First, though, we get an interview log between the Foundation and Anna Christian, the occultist who had been part of the Daughters of Eden before being apprehended by the Foundation.
So they did end up apprehending her. I thought they apprehended her, but then she got away and started this ritual. I guess I'm mistaken.
It seems the Foundation figured she might have some input on this situation and went to talk to her after losing contact with the teams. Anna is not especially cooperative.
Of course
but
not.
They offer her the chance of release, so she answers some questions. When told that Katarina Randolph opened the gate using the last appeal of Biffy, she remarks how much of an idiot Katarina is, and that she warned her over and over about this. Anna explains that
Okay.
she's a witch in the sense that she can sense more than normal people can through talking to animals and hearing the trees whisper.
Gotcha.
She can also hear darker and older things as well. When she discovered there were other people like her out there, she was elated and became enamored with the entire concept of the occult. She was most fascinated by rituals, such as mixing blood with ash and the gratings of a cloven hoof to poison water and rot crops.
Interesting.
She says it's not power you own, but power you wield. Real power. She says that Katerina and those that followed her were eco-terrorists, not witches. They didn't care about the cost of performing these rituals. They just cared about saving nature.
Okay, that makes sense. I can see that.
Anna had taught her how to do so.
So, I mean, the difference is that she understands the consequences of these actions, so she didn't go through with it, where the other people don't necessarily care. They just want to revert the world back to this, you know, pure nature state. So they went through with it, you know, with this ritual, regardless of whatever consequences there is. Okay, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense.
Cared about saving nature. Anna had taught her how to do some things, such as rusting the treads on a bulldozer or turning land to mud. It was never enough for Katerina, though, and she said that they won't be finished until they can wipe the bile of man off of Gaia's face.
Okay.
When Anna and the Daughters of Eden got a hold of the last appeal of Biffy, they firmly believed that the entity mentioned in the text was a nature deity, a champion of Gaia. In time, though, Anna came to learn that this is not what the entity was.
Yep.
She tried to tell Katerina the truth of the situation, but Katerina refused to believe her and ran off with the text. The truth of the matter is that the one who knows silence in the earth isn't a god of nature at all, but instead is a god of sacrifice. The world it lives in, the entities that live there, and itself are all created and sustained by sacrifices and rituals.
Gotcha.
It takes the souls of humans, plants, and animals and turns them into new life in its own image. She compares the way it would remake our world to replacing our rivers with battery acid. In other words, totally inimical to our natural life.
Right.
The opposite of what Katerina intended.
Which is like, I feel like very typical things that happen in stories like this, where someone, you know, they run before they can walk kind of a situation. You know, she didn't fully understand what she was getting into, just summoned this creature thinking, yeah, it's going to be exactly what we need. It's going to, you know, bring back the world to a sense of nature that we want, but instead it's going to have the opposite effect of recreating it in ways that it wants to, that are in fact the opposite of, you know, what we know of and what our existence is. So it would essentially destroy our nature and our world and recreate it in however it wanted to.
The Foundation asks her how to close the gate, but they already know the answer to that. And Anna just laughs, because the cost is too high, and Katerina didn't care about that at all.
Yep.
If you can't contain it, then you gotta kill it, and the Foundation then asks how. Anna says you can't, not with all the bombs and bullets in the world, because it is sustained by rituals. Plenty of rituals.
I mean, if it's sustained by rituals, then wouldn't you think that, I mean, I guess the ritual to sacrifice everyone would be the answer then, right? To like, okay, that's how you would state it. So I was going to say, like, if it's sustained by rituals, then there's got to be a ritual to like cut it off from its source of power, but that might essentially be it. Having to sacrifice everyone, so. But, you know, I would assume someone's probably going to come up with some other kind of ritual that, again, like with the deer, you can contain it.
Rituals are performed around the world every day, including by the Foundation. But it's not just magical rituals involving goat blood under a full moon. It's small rituals and sacrifices performed by everyday people, constantly.
True.
To kill this entity, you'd have to stop the entire world from doing these tiny rituals.
Okay. Okay. So everyone just doing their daily routines could be considered a ritual, thus empowering it even further. So now that the gateway is open, it's going to be constantly powered by everyone's day-to-day routine, aka rituals. And so the only way to do that is to get people to literally stop. I guess technically, even, you know, breathing could technically be considered a ritual, right? You know, you're taking in life, you're expelling, you know, bad air, toxins, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, even breathing, I guess, could be considered a ritual. So that would be, I guess, why the idea would be you would have to wipe out humanity so you could prevent all rituals and cut it off from its source of power. I had a thought that I was gonna say too, but now I lost my track of what I was saying. So let me hear that again. Maybe I'll remember. If not, then whatever.
It's performed by everyday people, constantly. To kill this entity, you'd have to stop the entire world from doing these tiny rituals. Rituals that are likely part of their daily routines that they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
This would also involve the Foundation stopping a number of rituals that they perform to keep plenty of other dangerous SCPs contained. Since they can't contain it, and they can't kill it, all they can do is hope that it never finds the gate and enters into our world.
I guess the idea would be, like, couldn't they then, if everything about this thing is ritual based, couldn't they then just find another ritual to, like, preoccupy it? You know, again, like the idea with the deer, where, like, the deer thinks it's contained because it observes the ritual and just believes it, you know? The ritual makes it believe that it's contained, so could they not then just create another ritual where this entity believes it's cut off from its source of power and all rituals have stopped, thus containing it, and then they could close the gate?
There's one final video transmission recorded by MTF Epsilon 13, and they're not in great shape. One member speaks to the camera and says that they've been there for 2 months now and have run out of rations.
Yeah.
Anything they try to eat just burns their mouth, giving credence to what Anna said about how the entity will reshape our world. And the water is drinkable, but is making them sick. They're up in the mountains now, heading towards some lights they've seen on the other side. They are currently resting on a narrow outcropping, and it's unclear how they managed to get there without climbing equipment, but they continue on. They eventually end up on a wide plateau overlooking the forest and more mountains, and they see a naked human dancing on the edge of the plateau. The team draws their weapons and approaches, spotting a symbol carved into the ground beneath her, and a human heart nearby. The human is female, and she is singing The Girl from Ipanema. After yelling at the girl to get on the ground, she turns to the team, revealing herself to be Katarina Randall.
Yeah.
A large wound is visible on her chest, but she continues dancing and singing.
She tore out her heart.
One of the members of Epsilon 13 opens fire on Katarina, and she collapses to the ground. Suddenly, a loud, low, droning sound is heard.
I feel like it might be a situation where she realized what she did was wrong, and she was then using this ritual of her with the symbol and dancing and her taking out the heart to contain this entity, and now that they've killed her, it's gonna get out.
Heard, followed by a flash of light that knocks the team off their feet. One member stands, their video still recording, and sees an entity below them in the valley, later identified as the one who knows silence in the earth.
Yep.
It is a gigantic deer, with its body terminating below its neck, and its head replaced with a massive, vibrating, white glowing crest. White glowing orbs spin around its torso, sending shimmering flecks into the air around it, and in the center of its head crest is a circular disc with a pitch black center.
This is different than the other deer, right? I mean, it sounds similar in a lot of different ways, just maybe like a different version. Like the other one had like revolving orbs around it as well, but they were like different.
The entity slowly steps through the valley, turning to face the team as Katarina's body lifts upwards and hangs in the air. Katarina begins laughing and calls out to Gaia. Her body shakes. A reversed scream is heard, and Katarina's head collapses into itself as a white seal emerges from her neck.
Jesus.
They receive a signal on their radios of Katarina singing, and all but one of the team opens fire on her. The same droning sound is heard as one of the team, Mercury, begins to run away. She looks and sees the rest of her team suspended in the air, and watches as their hearts are ripped from their bodies by an unseen force. She continues to sprint across the mountain until she runs into Katarina again. Mercury stops, pulls a knife from her belt, and charges at Katarina as her video feed goes out.
I feel like you're not going to be able to do much at that point.
The Foundation put a stop to any more explorations into SCP-4971, and the mall was entirely sealed off. Sounds of entities continue to be heard from inside the mall, but so far the Foundation has no idea what to do with this situation. Any attempts at destroying the mall or the forest would likely only hasten the entity's discovery of our world.
Yep.
A number of months after losing contact with the teams, a transmitter from within the forest connected to a Foundation server and began transmitting a significant amount of data, including weather, topology, and electromagnetic field data.
Interesting.
Also, the video and audio logs from both teams were received, which explains why the Foundation has them.
Right.
After the transfer, the transmitter disconnected. 10 days later, it connected again, showing a video feed of a long-range radio tower set up on top of a mountain. A few weeks later, a single image was transmitted of the ground, with the words, "Still here," etched into the dirt.
So, did Mercury live? Did she actually kill Katarina? And I set all this stuff up over there?
It seems that Mercury survived her scuffle with Katarina.
All
and
right.
is stuck inside
Mercury's
of the
a
anomaly.
badass. Hold up.
The Foundation wasn't about to risk a rescue mission. This would be the last they'd hear from her for 8 years, at which point the transmitter would activate once again for 18 seconds, sending a video feed. A woman's face is visible in extreme close-up, with what looks like a triangle in her iris.
Yeah.
She looks very frightened, and pulls the camera back to show her mouthing the words, "Can't run anymore," and "Sorry," before the feed ends. This is the last transmission they've received.
Well,
I know. Yet another all-powerful entity that's constantly on the verge of remaking or destroying our
and
world
a deer
is
on
not
top
exactly
of that.
the most original concept nowadays. I think 4971 succeeds less in part due to its overall concept, and more due to the creepy unraveling and discovery of the teams as they explore this inhospitable dimension. The horror of the fate of the people sacrificed to open the gate, and how they're forced to remain in this forest, as only a fragment of their former selves. We can see that Katarina retained some part of her humanity after all of it,
Yeah.
singing a song she likely had been fond of, but that's really all that remains. I'm not going to spout some grand lesson or profound moral to be taken from this SCP, as it's just some more classic cosmic horror. At this point, when you hear the words DJ Cactus and exploration logs, you either groan or get yourself something to drink and settle in. For those on board with this kind of stuff, though, it's some good horror.
We're gonna quote. We got a quote. Fuck yeah, dude. All that was left to us was to wonder. Who knows all that was inside? Let me start over. All that was left all that was left to us was to wonder who all this is in. Oh, my brain is like not working right now. Hold on. All that was left to us was to wonder who knows all that is innate to this world, or to any other. Why should there not be something buried deep within appearances, something that wears a mask to hide itself behind the visibility of nature? Thomas Ligotti, Sons of the Dead Dreamer and Grim Scribe. Okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it. That was the Exploring Series, SCP-4971 Rituals. Links will be down below in the description as always. To the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring Series channel, please do me the favor clicking on those links. If you enjoyed this video of his, go over there and give it a like. And if you enjoy the Exploring Series content and you're not subbed to him, please do me the favor of going over there and give the man some support. Hit that sub button on his channel. Makes a lot of wonderful content for the SCP universe and others, and definitely deserves the support. So at the beginning of this video, I thought it was going to be kind of a summary of various rituals and why rituals are used and how they affect the SCP universe, etc., etc., which is why I was talking about, you know, the deer and the Scarlet King and yada yada. But this turned out to be a whole other story about, you know, obviously some eco-terrorists that consider themselves to be some kind of druids and wardens of nature that felt that humanity was destroying the planet and were trying to bring back the purity of nature and summon a deity to do that. And unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily the deity that they were thinking. It was something entirely. However, I mean, I guess if you think about it, technically, it was doing kind of what they wanted to, right? It was bringing back this forest and creatures and animals. It's just in a different version, a different way. It's not something where like we right now would be able to live and exist in it, but as this entity would go out into the world, it would probably, I would assume, because it, you know, created that dimension or whatever with the forest and the mountains and the nature and the rivers and everything, that it would just create more of that out in the world, and that everything that, you know, every entity that came in contact with it, that it would be sacrificed and changed into whatever image it wanted to. So like the world would be recreated how it wanted to in some kind of natural image that it willed. So essentially they would be getting what they wanted, but not in the way they wanted or how they wanted. And everyone would be giving up their free will and all that kind of stuff to do that. So I don't know. Interesting story and interesting tale of, you know, these people starting this ritual in this mall. I wonder, so like they said originally that it happened, that they tried to do something in the 80s and it failed or whatever, and then they redid it again in, you know, the mid 2000s. I think it said 2007. That's when this tale was supposed to take place. And then so since then they've, you know, sealed off this mall and yada yada, and they're basically just hoping that this entity doesn't find the way into our world, because then what are you gonna do? And so you know, again, my thought was the idea behind this, it's interesting that it's powered by rituals, right? And it seemed like perhaps Anna, I believe it was Anna, right? I might be getting the names of the ladies confused with one who was caught and the one who actually performed the ritual, but I believe it was Anna, was in there, you know, doing some kind of ritual where it seemed like, you know, she'd draw the symbols on the ground and was dancing in a circle, dancing the song, you know, humming the song, singing the song, whatever. And essentially seems like she pulled her heart out to sacrifice. But it seemed like she essentially was powering everything initially that brought this entity in. And then from there, it kind of all expanded to all the rest of the beings and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I like the idea that it's powered by, you know, just the idea of rituals happening, and that, you know, everyone's daily routine could essentially be considered a ritual. You know, getting up in the morning, making your cup of coffee, whatever, that's a daily ritual, all that kind of stuff. That would essentially empower this creature. So the only way to really stop it would be to, you know, stop everyone from doing their normal daily rituals, thus, you know, disconnecting it from its power. But I wonder, like, is it a situation where they could, like the other deer, create some kind of ritual where it would think it is cut off from its power source, and thus believing it would then no longer have power and be able to be contained, you know, and that way they don't have to necessarily sacrifice everyone to shut this gateway and then just keep them all sealed, you know. And who knows what that would be, what it would take to do that, etc., etc. And then of course, like I mentioned in this, there's always SCP-2000. So if push comes to shove, they could just wipe everyone out, wait for a certain amount of time, you know, let it lose its power. The gate eventually would shut on its own, I believe, and then humanity could be restarted. So, but an interesting tale and just interesting ideas. It's also, you know, one of the idea that they thought they were summoning some kind of warrior of Gaia, but it was actually an entirely different being. Now, whether or not this being sent that out intentionally, you know what I mean? Like the last plea of Biffy or whatever, that tale, whether or not this entity had gone to Biffy and somehow had, like, you know, whispered to her and tried to trick her into releasing it at some point in time, you know, we don't know. You know what I mean? We just know that she was being, you know, burned at the stake, so her last plea was to try to summon this entity to save her, and it didn't happen. And so these eco-terrorists, you know, thought that this was going to be some kind of being that would, you know, summon these nature spirits to protect them and bring back nature, yada yada, as we know. So, like, it makes me wonder, was this entity, like, purposely masquerading as something else to get them to do that, to release it, etc., you know, to empower it? You know, who knows? But that's also a possibility, I guess. So, yeah, anyway, like I said, great video. That was SCP-4971 Rituals. Links below as always. And if you'd like to join us when we do these reactions live, we would love to have you guys come in here and join us. Join the conversations, add your 2 cents. There is a link to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer down below in the description, as well as the join button underneath the video. If you've been around the channel for a while and decide you want to take your sport to the next level, you know, you can get early access videos. You can join us when we do these live reactions. You can get priority and early access to videos, priority and kind of reaction requests you might do. I tried to do, you know, YouTube member streams at least 2, if not 3 times a week, sometimes more, depending, but I try to do at least 2 to 3, you know, minimum a week, as long as nothing else crazy is going on, like last week where we had a hurricane, so that kind of distracted from it. But yeah, so if any of that has any interest for you, you know, check those out if you decide you want to take your support to the channel to the next level. Regardless, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If you did enjoy this video, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. And thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.